join us for the only African race of the season, as we are at the Kyalami circuit, located somewhere between Johannesburg and Pretoria in South Africa. Round 2 of the 2018 FF1M Championship. And off the back of the opening race of the season, which proved to be quite an interesting one, we had the expected 3 teams qualifying quite well of Shake and Bake, Tornado and Andrew Racing, with Vino Kimmonen on pole position for that race, but Fernando Alonso jumping from 3rd to the lead by the first corner. But it was Alessandro Farina for Gajera Autosport who jumped Alonso and Kimmonen in the first round of pit stops, to then promptly pull away for the rest of the race and take a very measured and well-deserved maiden win. Good start for Gajera, who break their victory drought. They last won in the 2015 Japanese Grand Prix with Robert Kubica at the wheel. More on Robert Kubica a bit later on, but for the moment, this is the 4th time that FF1M has visited Kyalami. Last time was last season, which was won by Lewis Hamilton in a fairly simple lights to flag victory. And we're expecting 3 stops for this particular race. And pit stop strategy will be absolutely crucial, because if last season's race is anything to go by, overtaking is going to be extremely difficult. We've got the small matter of pre-qualifying to sort out first. Alessandro Farina topped the Group A session and eliminated our Tilsley, which means that Galaxy will be participating in a race for the first time this season, thanks to the efforts of Carlos Sainz and Robert Kubica. That was your more on Robert Kubica. Group B, meanwhile, saw Tornado fairly comfortably top the session, Vino Kimmonen ahead of Charles Leclerc, eliminated from this group, unfortunately, our Monolith racing system. The good news for them, though, is because as they're guaranteed to be last after this race, they'll be in Group A, which is a little bit more forgiving. Group A for the next meeting at the San Marino Grand Prix at Mugello. So there's light at the end of the tunnel for Monolith. Now then, the starting grid for this one, we do have an 18 chassis on pole position, because it is in the form of Kevin Magnussen, who takes his 8th career pole position, 8th career for FJR, and joining him on the front row is Sebastian Vettel. The other FJR of Caterina Caracciola will be starting 3rd, ahead of the Melbourne race winner Alessandro Farina. Then Shake and Bake's Fernando Alonso will be starting 5th, ahead of Vino Kimmonen, reigning world champion, in 6th place. Next up is the other Shake and Bake of Nolan Bryant, ahead of James Clark, who solidified Gajera's strong start to the season by finishing 5th in that first race, meaning that the Brazilian-Japanese team lead the championship. Rounding out the top 10 are Daniel Ricciardo and Lewis Hamilton. Then it's the other Mitchell of Chuck Bucknam in 11th, and Charles Leclerc, again not performing particularly well in qualifying, down in 12th. Then Kimi Raikkonen, one of the stars at Melbourne, will be starting 13th in the AJ, ahead of Mason Taylor 14th, who outqualifies his highly rated Argentine teammate. And All Willows Row 8, with Max Verstappen 15th, ahead of Roman Grosjean 16th. Then it's Mattia Alfonsi in the other AJ 17th, ahead of Thomas Gonzalez. Fairly low down the order, he's been performing quite well in the practice sessions, so 18th is a bit of a disappointment for him. Not as disappointing as GRM, unfortunately, because they're way back in row 10, seemingly sticking with the hard tyres for some reason. Bottas ahead of Perez, then Galaxy round out the back row with Carlos Sainz ahead of Robert Kubica. And just a quick one on Sunday warm-up before we go into the race proper. That was topped by Alessandro Farina. Pole sitter Kevin Magnussen was down in 13th, although only half a second off of Farina's best time, which does indicate that FJR may have gone into the qualifying session with a bit of a qualifying setup. I could confirm that, but I might keep my cards close. Second in warm-up was Charles Leclerc, which kind of suggests that he has gone a little bit more race-focused compared to Vino Kimmonen, but Kimmonen was 4th quickest, so it could be that Leclerc just got a bit unlucky in qualifying. So, we wait for the red light to come on, there it goes, and a few seconds later the green light coming on shortly. Off it goes! And it's Kevin Magnussen who gets away fairly well, but Sebastian Vettel is alongside him into the first sweep. And it is Sebastian Vettel who takes the lead off of Kevin Magnussen. Caracciola holds on to third, Farina fourth. And Väinö Kiminen's got on away well. He's moved up from 6th up to 5th, ahead of Fernando Alonso, with James Clark getting the jump on Nolan Bryant. Now then, into Sunset Curve. Farina was having a look at Caracciola, but nothing going on there. And both Galaxies have made up a position. Decent first lap and first race for them, as it's Sebastian Vettel going through the S's in the lead of the race. Since he has got the jump on Kevin Magnussen, I'm kind of expecting him to pull away a little bit, but Magnussen's not doing a bad job so far in this first lap, as nearly contact between Chuck Bucknam and Charles Leclerc for 10th place, going through the hairpin at the top. It has a name, and I do have a map in front of me. It is known as Leukop. Was known as something else in the olden days. In fact, the olden days that hairpin didn't exist, but these days it's called Leukop. As into the final corner, Farina's putting the pressure on Caracciola, who was only 19th quickest in warm-up, so let's see how the race goes for her, as Vettel starts lap 2 in the lead, 7/10 ahead of Kevin Magnussen, who himself is a further 7/10 ahead of his teammate, as through Barbecue Bend onto the support pits straight, and Farina is going to have a look at the inside of Caracciola into Sunset. They're side by side, and Farina is going to take that third place off of Katerina Caracciola. And lurking up to the Swiss driver is Väinö Kiminen. Now then, if overtaking is going to be very difficult, then that was a key move for Farina, and a key one if he's going to win his second race in a row. And already Kiminen is right up to the back of Caracciola for 4th. As through Leukop they go down the mineshaft straight. As Kiminen has a look, that's going to be a brave one up the inside there. I think he's managed it, going around the outside at the Continental Curve, and they're still side by side, approaching the kink. Caracciola dropping down the field in this very early stage of the race. So it's going to be a bit of a long afternoon for her. As they start the third lap, and it is Vettel who is the quickest driver on the circuit at 1 minute 11.484. He was 4/10 quicker, probably half a second quicker than Magnussen on that lap, and Magnussen's going to have his mirrors full of Farina in due course, as Fernando Alonso now has a look at Caracciola. This shake and bake is very quick in a straight line, so I wouldn't be surprised if Alonso gets past Caracciola fairly quickly. And if you look in the tower on the left-hand side, you can see nearly all of the field have gone for medium tyres, except for AJ, who've gone for soft Avons, and GRM and Galaxy, presumably having forgotten to change their spreadsheets, are stuck on their hard tyres. So through the long left sweep into Continental Curve, it's Magnussen versus Farina for second place, and pretty clear that Farina has the quicker car at this stage. He was 3/4 of a second back as they started this lap, and as they crossed this second sector point, only half a second. And this is going to allow Vettel to scamper away into the distance a little bit, but Vettel only 4/10 quicker than Magnussen on that lap, so Magnussen doing a pretty good job considering that FJR have a bit of a qualifying lean in their setup. That is confirmation. So on the support pit straight, Alonso going to have a look at Caracciola into Sunset Bend, and Caracciola shutting the door quite firmly. Yorkshire versus Yorkshire. That was through... which corner was that? That was the... I should keep the map in front of me. It's Clubhouse. That's the name of the corner after Sunset. As Caracciola holds the middle line going through Leukop Bend. And that's going to give Alonso an opportunity through Mineshaft Straight. But the Shake and Bake doesn't seem to have as much straight line speed compared to the Tornado, based on the early stages, based on Kiminen's early overtake on Caracciola. And how's Leclerc doing? If he has got a slightly more race bias setup. He's down in 10th, so he did overtake Chuck Bucknam at some point in the early laps. As Vettel 3/10 quicker than Kevin Magnussen on that lap, but Kymmenen is catching this battling pair. Kymmenen in 4th, chasing Magnussen and Farina. Now, what's Farina's straight line speed like on the support pitch straight into Sunset? He didn't get close to making an overtake attempt. Alonso's close to making an overtake attempt, but not quite on that occasion. Now, Alonso better be careful because James Clark is lurking up to the Spaniard. Pretty clear that Caracciola is a bit of a roadblock at the moment, but so she'll do well to score points at this rate. We have a replay, and there's a bit of a slow exit, and that has allowed Alonso to get through on the penultimate corner. So, getting a bit too wide onto the curb was Caracciola, dropping down to 6th. Now, is this Farina having a look at Magnussen into Sunset? He certainly had a look, but where's Magnussen gone? He's off! Magnussen tagging the Armco barrier, and is he going to rejoin safely? Just about. Rejoining down in 4th position ahead of Alonso, so Magnussen desperately trying to hang on to that 2nd place, getting onto the marbles on the outside, and very lucky not to sustain any damage after that contact with the Armco. So that's moved Farina up into 2nd, Kymmenen up into 3rd, and Caracciola through. This is approaching Barbecue. She's going to have an off. FJRs are struggling for balance, it seems, in this race so far. And that mistake has put Caracciola out of the points. Now here's Charles Leclerc, now up to 9th place, challenging Daniel Ricciardo for 8th place. This is going through Continental Bend, approaching the final couple of corners. Lap 7 it is, still Sebastian Vettel leading, now 3.1 seconds ahead of Farina. And if we just wait for the timing tower to update on the left, I think Vettel should still be the fastest driver out on the circuit. And after the disastrous start that Andrew had in Melbourne with neither car finishing, this will be exactly what they need. Exactly what they need to kickstart their championship campaign. So through Sunset, on board with Leclerc, looking for some more points, but it is very difficult to overtake on this circuit unless you've got either a much faster car or if the driver is struggling with the balance of their car. Farina setting the fastest lap as he goes on to his 8th lap of the race. Now 2.8 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel. Let's see what the gap's like through Sunset Bend. Still 2.8 seconds. Farina about 0.04 of a second quicker through the first sector, but there's not really much to do in that first sector. Just go through the kinks, brake a bit, and then turn left through Barbecue Bend. And let's see what the gap is like through the second sector point, as Farina goes through the Leeuwkop hairpin. And the second sector point is right at the exit of this corner here, 2.7. Farina has got the balance of his car pretty well sorted, and he is going to set off after Sebastian Vettel's race lead. So let's see how the rest of the field are. Well, Kimi Raikkonen is lapping pretty quickly, but he is down in 12th place. And Kimi Raikkonen was quick in Sunday warm-up, despite qualifying down in 13th. He was 5th quickest. So if Kimi can get his strategy right, then he should be doing quite well, moving up through the order on his fresher, soft Avon tyres. Farina took best part of 0.2 out of Vettel's lead on that lap. And he's still catching him. That was another 0.3 taken out of him as they now go on to lap 10. 2.2 seconds is the gap between Vettel and Farina. And Vettel's not got much fuel left, so looking to make an early pit stop for tyres and fuel, it seems. Through Sunset, now into Clubhouse. Vettel setting a personal best first sector, but Farina is quicker than that. And Kymmenen himself in 3rd place, 1.8 seconds off of Alessandro Farina, and Magnussen now 9.2 seconds behind race leader Sebastian Vettel. He's maintaining 0.8 of a gap over Fernando Alonso, though we'll see what the gap is like at the end of this lap between Magnussen and Alonso. James Clark's not doing too badly. He's in 6th place, 0.6 of a second behind Fernando Alonso at this stage. And rounding out the top 8, Nolan Bryant, fairly quiet so far, but he's fairly comfortable up in 7th place. 1.7 behind Clark and 1.8 ahead of Ricciardo. Vettel now 1.9 seconds ahead of Alessandro Farina. And Farina was 0.2 quicker than Väinö Kymmenen on that lap. Magnussen pretty much 1/10 quicker than Alonso, so Magnussen's doing well, even if he hasn't got the best race setup underneath him. At the moment we are focusing on this battle for the race lead, but now we switch focus to Lewis Hamilton, who is going through the S's, and out of the race goes Lewis Hamilton. He's just understeered wide into the tyre barriers, so a disastrous start for Lewis Hamilton gets even worse. And you can see the wheel was flying about on the outside there, so that wheel has travelled a long way. So a bit of a clumsy error from Lewis Hamilton, who in the first race suffered a complete electrical failure, which was diagnosed as a broken alternator. So while the alternator belts might have been a bit stronger, the car was certainly broken. And we saw in that replay a shot of the Willows. They were running silver cars in pre-season testing and the first race, but for this race only they have reverted to an all-black livery with the turquoise-coloured wings. Team boss Joseph Willows had a family member pass away recently, so we wish you and your family well, Joseph. Into the pits, race leader and second place into the pits. That is Sebastian Vettel from the race lead, Alessandro Farina from second. So temporarily Väinö Kymmenen will be leading the race. A very, very good stop from Sebastian Vettel. 4.9 seconds keeps him comfortably ahead of Farina. Both pitted on the same lap, and that is the difficult pit exit. And contact between Ricciardo and Leclerc as a result of that dodgy pit exit. So, well, Leclerc made contact with both Andrews in the first race, and he looks as if he's at it again, but that was not really Leclerc's fault. That was just the way the pit exit worked. It certainly helped Vettel. Now let's see a replay. So there you can see Vettel coming out. Ricciardo hesitates. Leclerc tries to take advantage of that round the outside. Maybe he could have left a bit more space, but yeah, it's just one of those incidents that you can't really control. But luckily both are still running 7th and 8th, Leclerc and Ricciardo. So it was as if Leclerc had overtaken Ricciardo without contact, let's call it that. And where did Farina rejoin, by the way? He was rejoined behind the battling Leclerc and Ricciardo, so that will cost Farina quite dearly and will help Sebastian Vettel pull out a lead as Väinö Kymmenen comes into the pits from the temporary race lead. Now his target, he should be able to rejoin ahead of Farina if Farina has been delayed, but now Kymmenen's been delayed himself by James Clark coming into the pits. So a little bit of tactics going on there from Gajera. Hold up the tornado, but where is Kymmenen going to rejoin? Is that Sebastian Vettel, or is that Daniel Ricciardo? I think Kymmenen's rejoined ahead of Ricciardo. And somewhere in amongst that, Caracciola has overtaken Farina, so Farina not having a good outlap, it seems, because he's now back behind an FJR. And Kymmenen, it was important for him to rejoin ahead of Ricciardo because he's now right in front of this little gaggle, now leading this train. But we'll see the difference between new tyres and a low fuel load, because Farina did take on quite a lot of fuel, so he's looking to do a fairly long middle stint as he looks to try and retake Caracciola for what at the moment is 8th place, but should be for a net 3rd once everyone makes their first of 3 stops. We're expecting 3 stops all around for this race. Through Continental, we saw Caracciola make a mistake earlier, or is it Magnussen making... No, it was Caracciola making a mistake earlier in that race, in the earlier stages. Lost position to Alonso. As we're entering lap 15. Still focusing on Alessandro Farina as we go through the opening sweeps before Barbecue Bend. No such mistake for Caracciola this time. Clunks the curb, as they all seem to do. Can Farina repeat the earlier overtaking to Sunset Bend? No, he cannot. Caracciola shuts the door, and They're all in a Kymmenen train, as Kevin Magnussen is going to come into the pits at the end of lap 15, so he's stayed out a couple more laps compared to Kymmenen, Vettel and Farina. So we'll see how this strategy plays out, as Bear left into the pit lane. Magnussen negotiates the tight entry, looks for his mechanics, which are somewhere in the middle. I think it's the one with the black overalls. Nolan Bryant's also coming into the pits. Teammate Fernando Alonso takes up the temporary race lead, and Sebastian Vettel will move up into second. 5.5, decent stop from Kevin Magnussen. Now, how is this rejoin going to happen? He's going to rejoin. He delayed Farina quite badly there. And in fact, wasn't actually that far behind Farina. That just shows you how much Farina has been delayed on his set of outlaps. And it also shows you just how much track position is key, because Vettel is now 8 seconds ahead of Alessandro Farina, and only a few laps ago, Farina was challenging for the race lead. Into the pits comes Fernando Alonso, leaving it until lap 16 before making his first pit stop. Pretty much, well, it's not quite 1/4 distance yet. Are we expecting Leclerc to pit as well, or is Leclerc going to take second position temporarily, as Vettel now rejoins back into the race lead? Looking good for Andrew Racing, as Caracciola comes into the pits. And that was rejoining right in front of Kevin Magnussen, and that is crucial. Fernando Alonso has got the jump on Magnussen, and Bucknam nearly getting the jump on Magnussen as a result of that as well, but Bucknam has yet to make his first pit stop. Now let's have a look at the straight line speeds, and not even a sniff going into Sunset Bend for Magnussen on Alonso. And I can reveal that FJR are running half ERS for this race. It's a new setting for them. It's usually clean, crunch, distorted or mode 11, but they're trying out a different setting this time. So Vettel back in the race lead. Leclerc has yet to make a pit stop, and he's not going to pit this lap, so he's going furthest out of the front runners. And if he is running a decent race setup, then this has been a decent first stint for Leclerc, despite qualifying way down in 12th. You'd normally expect Leclerc to be a decent qualifier, and he's going to be pitting at the end of lap 18. You can see his indicator is on. As through the opening sweeps into Barbecue Bend, and Leclerc's keeping Vettel honest, so let's see how Leclerc's race develops as it goes on. But now we've got to watch out for Väinö Kymmenen. He's only 5.1 seconds behind race leader Sebastian Vettel. It's now 5 seconds as they go through the first sector point. And what will it be through the second sector point? More pit stops are happening. I think Chuck Bucknam was coming into the pits, because now we're seeing Mattia Alfonsi in 8th place, but yet to make a pit stop, as is Thomas Gonzalez, as is Daniel Ricciardo. So once those 5, because Valtteri Bottas has yet to make his first pit stop, once those 5 come into the pits, then everyone will have completed their first of 3 pit stops. Into the pits comes Charles Leclerc. And Charles Leclerc could have been driver of the day at Melbourne had it not been for his over-aggression. I think there were 4 incidents, but I can count 3 off the top of my head. It were both Andrews and also his own teammate on the final lap of the race. You can see Alfonsi, Gonzalez and Bottas into the pits. Ricciardo's staying out for another lap, so he will officially be the last to make their first pit stop. It was a long pit stop for Leclerc, by the way. That was approaching 8 seconds, and is rejoined in 9th place, out of the points, but could still be back into the points once Ricciardo comes into the pits. A blown engine, and it's the Galaxy of Carlos Sainz. So a slightly inauspicious debut race for the Galaxy Grand Prix team, based in the Philippines. And Carlos Sainz, his last 2 races were on the podium in Pedersen's Swan Song races. Failed to qualify for the first race. Did qualify for this one, but has had an early bath. Lap 22 and a blown engine. Galaxy using Megatron engines, by the way, customer Megatrons. A Marshall running onto the track as Sebastian Vettel goes through Barbecue Bend. And he is being caught by Väinö Kymmenen. Kymmenen looking for a race win. And it could happen. We'll see how the rest of this race goes. And as for the rest of the top 8, now that everyone has made their first pit stops, Farina is in 3rd place, quite a way back, and Caracciola into the pits with an electrical issue. Now, is she going to change her strategy? Because keep an eye on that fuel gauge at the top. 14 laps, 19 laps. I think she's going to have to do a 4-stop race, so Caracciola's race going from bad to worse. As she now sits in 19th place. Who we're looking at, James Clark versus Charles Leclerc for 7th place. How big are your elbows, Charles? We'll find out as we approach the first series of corners on this next lap. Now lap 27, Vettel holds 3.1 seconds now over Väinö Kymmenen. And Alessandro Farina 8.2 seconds behind Vettel, so even after the traffic has cleared, Farina is still around 8 seconds behind race leader Sebastian Vettel. Through Barbecue. Now let's see into Sunset the straight line difference between a manufacturer Mugen versus a manufacturer Climax, and it'll give us an indication as to if these teams are running higher engine modes. Not a lot of long straights, so I wouldn't be expecting them to. But you never know, somebody may have gone rogue. One of the teams may have gone rogue and decided to put the engine on full whack, even though it's not recommended. It's more of an aero circuit. And overtaking being difficult is being proven correct, because at a different circuit Leclerc would have probably overtaken Clark already. Lap 28. It's now 2.8 seconds, the gap between Vettel and Kymmenen, and Farina is catching the pair of them. It's 7.7 seconds, and Alonso now less than 10 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel. Now they're all closing up like an accordion. And Leclerc nowhere near Clark going into the sweeps, so he's going to have to get a good run out of Barbecue into the support pit straight if he's going to challenge for 7th place. And still nowhere near, even despite the slipstream, so Clark putting in a good defensive drive, or the Tornado aren't running as much as they were like. And out, that's the GRM Valtteri Bottas. That's another blown Megatron, so early evidence from this season is that Megatrons are a bit unreliable, and, well, Magnussen making a bit of a pig's ear of moving out of the way, and as is the rest of them. Don't need to slow down that much. And Bottas is crawling, he's desperate to finish that lap, but here comes the Marshall, here comes an AJ to make a Horlicks out of overtaking a stranded car. I think that was Alfonsi. Next one along is Taylor. In fact, it's the two CBAs, Taylor ahead of Gonzalez, and Taylor's got a bit of a queue right behind him. He's got Gonzalez, Bucknam, Raikkonen, Verstappen and Perez. Now we're going to start the second round of pit stops, and curiously it's Daniel Ricciardo. He was the last of the first stoppers, now he's the first of the 2 stoppers. So curious strategy that he's taken there, and he's going to take a lot of fuel for this 3rd stint, but a good pit stop, 5.5 seconds. There goes Alfonsi, and nice bit of clear track for Daniel Ricciardo. Can he do something about Charles Leclerc? I doubt it, he was quite a way behind. But it'd be nice to him to do some quick laps. And in fact, Vettel's going for the early pit stop as well, so Sebastian Vettel, next lap, and both Andrews have already now made their second pit stops. Kymmenen pitting at the same time. So, again, just like the first round of pit stops, first and second coming in simultaneously. In fact, the top 4 all coming in simultaneously, because we've got Vettel, Kymmenen, Farina and Alonso all in the pits. And is Kevin Magnussen going to take the lead temporarily? He is indeed. So, and got a shake and bake because he's going to get into the mix. It's Nolan Bryant going to get in between Kinnunen and Farina. In fact, it's Kinnunen and Clark. Farina is a fair bit behind. It's not worked out too badly for Farina, actually. He's got some nice clear track, which is more than can be said for Nolan Bryant, James Clark and Charles Leclerc, who are all tied together now for 4th, 5th and 6th, but now that the second pit stops are underway, that order's going to change quite dramatically. So through the S's, plunging downhill and back uphill for the right-hander. That was where Lewis Hamilton crashed out earlier on, in a Mitchell which I'm still not expecting to be that competitive this season, and if Lewis Hamilton is having one of his 2013 seasons, then yeah, Mitchell are going to struggle a bit, I think, unless they really focus on their car. Rounding the final couple of corners, Nolan Bryant is going to come into the pits, as is Charles Leclerc, as is Kevin Magnussen, very briefly race leader. There is Kev in front of these two. Should rejoin first, no problem. And Nolan Bryant, that was a long pit stop, and that's allowed Charles Leclerc to get the jump on the shake and bake driver. So excellent pit stop for the Tornado pit crew, 4.9 seconds, and he'd already got the jump before Bryant had set off. Good work, Tornado. Meanwhile, Vettel now 1.6 seconds ahead of Väinö Kinnunen as James Clark comes into the pits, temporarily third. Where's he going to rejoin in relation to Leclerc and Bryant? I fancy Clark's chances, actually, because the pit exit is such that it rejoins right onto the racing line, and those already on the pit straight tend to be quite hesitant. But 6 seconds, that is not as quick as Leclerc's pit stop. And there's Leclerc. Is he going to rejoin ahead of Clark, or is Clark going to manage it? He's managed it. Well done, James Clark. He's got the jump on both Leclerc and Bryant. But can Leclerc battle back going down the back straight into Sunset Bend? Right behind the Gojira driver. But not even thinking about a look. Again, very difficult to overtake around this circuit. These two should probably work together, actually, because Magnussen is 4.7 seconds up the road from these trio, because we're still counting Nolan Bryant in the mix. Yeah, we should get these three working together, and we get a pretty decent battle for 5th towards the end of the race. We're going to have a battle for the lead soon. It's now 1.6 seconds, the gap between Vettel and Kinnunen. Farina still in there, 5.4 seconds, and Alonso doing a good job, 7.6 seconds. Now on lap 38, 1 second. Farina 4.9, Alonso 6.9. Again, it's all closing up very, very nicely. And a small correction between Magnussen and Clark, it's actually closer to 7 seconds. That will be in part down to that pit exit. Thomas Gonzalez coming into the pits from 10th place. Now, he'd gotten ahead of Taylor before the pit stops began, so Gonzalez doing quite well for CBA, but he'll do well to score points unless there's some unreliability ahead of him. And if any unreliability is likely to happen, it's going to be from the Megatron and Judd powers. Apparently Judd's control electronics system could be a little bit better. Maybe that's a follow-up reason for Caracciola making that unscheduled second pit stop. I think Gonzalez's fastest lap there is a bit of an error. I think that was down to the pit lane. When it all updates itself, it should still be Alessandro Farina, the fastest on the circuit. Vettel's in some traffic now. He's approaching a Willows. Is that Roman Grosjean? I think it may be. It could be Verstappen. We'll try and see what car's ahead of that Willows. If it's a Mitchell, then it is Verstappen. It's a Galaxy, so it is Grosjean. Grosjean letting him through at the undulating S's. And Grosjean now is going to stay ahead of Väinö Kinnunen for a little bit, but eventually he will be lapped. Mason Taylor comes into the pits. He's reached half distance, which was more than he reached in Melbourne. Quite a few second pit stops going on, Kimi Raikkonen and Sergio Perez making pit stops as well. They've left it past half distance, about lap 38, before making their second pit stops, so playing the longer game. Grosjean's already made his second pit stop, he's got quite a bit of fuel on board. But Väinö Kymmenen is looking to lap him pretty quickly. And Vettel half a second quicker than Väinö Kymmenen on that lap, so Vettel negotiating the traffic pretty well. As they're now on their 40th laps. Through Sunset Bend, focusing on the tornado of Väinö Kymmenen, finished third at Melbourne, was running second in the closing stages before his teammate got a bit frisky with him. As through at the S's goes Väinö Kymmenen to put the lap on Romain Grosjean. Next to be lapped is Robert Kubica in the sole remaining Galaxy as Caracciola comes into the pits. Now, is this going to be a short fill or a long fill? It's a shortish fill, so Caracciola's got another pit stop to make after this. So, an unconventional 4-stop, but not by choice. Out of the pits, 7.1 seconds. That's in P17. I don't think she'll be scoring points, unfortunately. Car's pretty good in qualifying, though. Now this is a replay. What's Kimi Raikkonen been up to? Turning in left at the S's, turning right, bit of a twitch, bit of understeer. Into the wall goes Kimi Raikkonen. That is an AJ out of the race, and copybook blotted somewhat for the most experienced driver on the grid. Oh, we got more traffic now. Sebastian Vettel right up behind Caracciola, and Caracciola lifting off the throttle, going through the back straight into Sunset Bend. And the top three are proper close, 1.3 seconds covering the lot of them, but now that Vettel has got a car in between himself and Väinö Kymmenen, he's going to pull out a bit of breathing space. Through the S's. No such problems for Sebastian Vettel. And into Le Cop hairpin. Next to be lapped is Max Verstappen in the Willows. All Judds still running, all 6 of them, so that's decent reliability and decent development for them, as Kymmenen is being held up by Caterina Caracciola. And is this going to give Farina an opportunity going through the next lap? Not quite yet. Give it another few corners of holding up, and Farina may have the opportunity. So, 1 second is the gap between Vettel and Kymmenen. 0.6 exactly is the gap between Kymmenen and Farina, and Fernando Alonso has got a bit of clear air and is using that well because he's now less than 6 seconds behind Alessandro Farina. So, down the back straight, Caracciola moves off the racing line to let Väinö Kymmenen through. Sensible driving. Now next to overtake her is Alessandro Farina. Next to be lapped by race leader Vettel are Verstappen and Taylor. As all 6 cars that you can see in shot made it through the S's no problem. And further back, Leclerc is still stuck behind James Clark for 6th place. Leclerc may be ruining his setup option, qualifying down in 12th and then having to try and fight his way back up the order. But he's gotten stuck behind a Mugen-powered Kajera of James Clark. Nolan Bryant in 8th place is 5 seconds behind the battling duo. And Kevin Magnussen 4.1 seconds ahead of Clark and Leclerc. And Kymmenen gained 0.4 on Sebastian Vettel on that lap. They're now on to lap 51. And Vettel's still got a few laps of fuel remaining, so it'll be probably lap 54, 55, maybe even 56 before we see Vettel back into the pits. Now Farina laps Caracciola. A few laps ago that was for position, now it is not for position. So Vettel now approaching Max Verstappen, who himself is trying to do something about Mason Taylor in front of him. And he needs to do it pretty quickly because Kymmenen closing right up to the back of the Andrew Racing car. And Alonso, 5 seconds now behind Sebastian Vettel. Will we see him in shot? Just about, going through Lukot Bend down Mineshaft Straight. And Vettel seemingly can't do anything about Max Verstappen just yet. It's going to have to be down the support pit straight again. Now we've only got 20 more laps to go, including the one that they're about to begin. Just seeing the lap times on the top right. Vettel did a 1:12.8 on that lap, 1.3 seconds slower than his fastest. I think Farina does still hold the fastest lap. Alonso took 0.8 of a second out of race leader Vettel, and now he's on the same straight as the Andrew driver. Alonso on the move. And lap 55, and now we're going to see some pit stops. Väinö Kymmenen and Max Verstappen chooses a very awkward place to let Sebastian Vettel through. He's going to have to let Kymmenen and Farina through at the same time. He's let one of them through. That is going to cost Farina once again. The Italian has been a bit frustrated this race. It could have had quite an easy race win as Vettel locks up his tyre. And that's going to give Kymmenen a bit of impetus to try and close in a bit more on the slipstream going through Mineshaft. And Alonso is only 2.6 seconds behind all three of these. So who on earth is going to be leading the race after the final round of pit stops? Now Farina's being badly held up by Verstappen, as into the pits comes Väinö Kymmenen, so he's the first to pit. And maybe Vettel should have reacted to that pit stop. Vettel's slowing! Vettel's slowing down on the pit straight! Oh dearie me! 2 races in a row, Sebastian Vettel has broken down. Unbelievable. And once again it's a suspension problem, so they need to toughen up their suspensions, do Andrew Racing. Now that's changed the complexion of this final bit of the race, as Kymmenen rejoins right in front of the battling Kubica and Grosjean. But importantly, just about ahead of Nolan Bryant. So Kymmenen now has a great opportunity to win this race thanks to Vettel's breakdown. He needs to stay calm in his outlaps. Oh, I cannot believe that about Sebastian Vettel. So Andrew Racing, if they are to challenge for championships, then this is absolutely not what they needed. And we've got Farina and Alonso due into the pits at this lap, and Verstappen again making it difficult for the people he's supposed to let through, and that's given Farina quite a bit of help. But Alonso, his pit box is after. So Farina needs a good stop to maintain track position, and 5.3 seconds will do just nicely. Now, where is Väinö Kymmenen? Well, that's Leclerc. Now, is Kymmenen going to rejoin? Farina's squeezing him a bit, and he's done it. Alessandro Farina has jumped back up into the race lead, back ahead of Väinö Kymmenen, but importantly for Kymmenen, ahead of Fernando Alonso. Now we've just got a couple more pit stops to go, then it should be set for 2 wins in a row for Alessandro Farina, unless Väinö Kymmenen can do something about Alessandro Farina right now. Needs to. Farina has got 1 lap fresher tyres. Can Kymmenen do anything about it? And meanwhile, Alonso was just ahead of Nolan Bryant after his pit stop, but Bryant and Ricciardo have third pit stops to make. And where's Leclerc in amongst that? He is 8th place at the moment. I think looking at... so Leclerc has made a pit stop and looking to do something about Kevin Magnussen and James Clark. Can Leclerc finally jump James Clark? Well, Kevin Magnussen is into the pits now, and Clark continuing for at least 1 more lap. He's going to come in at the end of lap 58. You can see that from Farina's pit indicator. If it's red, it means your teammate is into the pits. Now, is Magnussen going to rejoin ahead of... Oh, off goes Farina, pretty much off the circuit, and Kymmenen's going to retake track position from the Italian driver. So a mistake from Kymmenen, and is Alonso going to do something about it as well? No, not quite. And I'm just keeping an eye on the on the lap charts, I think Magnussen is still ahead of Leclerc. And now the important one is James Clark. Where is he going to rejoin after his final pit stop? We should be seeing it soon. So that costly mistake from Alessandro Farina has now put Väinö Kymmenen into the net race lead. And if he stays there, then that will be Tornado's first victory at South Africa to add to their illustrious CV of wins. As into the pits comes James Clark. Keep an eye on this pit stop, it needs to be a quick one if he is to rejoin ahead of Magnussen and Leclerc. Well, there's Väinö Kymmenen back into the race lead, and Nolan Bryant, did he hold up James Clark for a bit there? Well, here comes Kevin Magnussen, just ahead, and James Clark once again ahead of Charles Leclerc. It's been a frustrating race for Charles Leclerc. He's now up to 6th place. So one position better than during the third stint, but that is only because of Sebastian Vettel's unfortunate suspension breakage. That's Magnussen now in 4th place. So despite his qualifying lean, he's done pretty well to stay in 4th place, and only 11 seconds behind Väinö Kymmenen as well. We're looking at the CBA of Thomas Gonzalez, currently in 10th place, going through the S's. That was pretty good through the left. Going through the right, that's not pretty good. Bang! Out of the race goes Thomas Gonzalez. So that is the first Judd car out of the race, and with it only being 6 laps to go, he'll still be classified actually, and not too bad. We've got another issue for a Judd-powered car, and it's Roman Grosjean. Can he make it into the pits? We don't know what the issue is. It's electrical once again, so probably relating to gear shifting or just something wrong with the electronics of the steering wheel, but a new steering wheel will fix that no problem, and Grosjean makes it into the pits. So we've still got 5 Judd-powered cars in the race. And there's still yellow flags out. I imagine that will be for Gonzalez. They're still trying to clear the Argentine's car. So we are entering the final stages. Only 6 more laps to go. And it is Väinö Kymmenen leading from Alessandro Farina. Fernando Alonso 3rd, Kevin Magnussen 4th, James Clark, Charles Leclerc, Daniel Ricciardo and Nolan Bryant completing the top 8. As, out of the final corner, only 4 more laps to go now. Väinö Kymmenen holds, it was 0.8 of a second, it's now 0.9 of a second. Well, close to a second if you round up. That's over Alessandro Farina. Fernando Alonso holding on to 3rd, 4.7 seconds off of the race leader, so his final set of tyres not working too brilliantly. We had a brief yellow flags. I didn't see who that was for, but anyway, it doesn't concern the top 6, 7, 8. So somebody must have had a quick off and then a quick rejoin. And how are they doing on this lap? It's still 9/10, that was across the first sector. Now we've shifted forward to 2 laps remaining. And through Continental Bend, 2 more corners before starting the final lap. It'll be Väinö Kymmenen, and he's got a fairly, I wouldn't say it's comfortable, but it's been static at 9/10 of a second for the past few laps now. Final lap for Väinö Kymmenen. Through the opening sweeps, and his last lap time was a 1 minute 11.778. Still in the 111s, that's fairly decent pace. And Farina, well, it's showing as 0.8 of a second, but rounded up to 9/10 as they start this final lap. Fernando Alonso slipping back as the final stint is going along. He's now 5.7 seconds off. And 4th, not completely secure for Magnussen just yet, but he has got 9/10 of a gap over James Clark, who's done pretty well to frustrate Charles Leclerc for pretty much the whole race. But that's the risk that Charles Leclerc took by taking on a slightly more race bias setup. You get stuck in traffic at a circuit that's very hard to overtake, and that's what happens. 3 more corners to go now, and it's looking good for Väinö Kymmenen to take his first win of the season, to maintain his championship, maintain some sort of championship challenge, but he won't be leading the championship after this one because the second place man's done pretty well. But Väinö Kymmenen wins the South African Grand Prix. Alessandro Farina less than a second off of the Finnish driver, and Fernando Alonso coming home in third place for the Shake and Bake. Shake and Bake's first podium of the season. But first and second, that's their second podium in 2 races. In a slightly different order, Kymmenen ahead of Farina, and that's Kymmenen's 8th career victory. Kevin Magnussen holds on to 4th place, so some good points for himself in the JB18 chassis, so the development rate will certainly benefit FJR more than Tornado, Gajera and Shake and Bake. Talking of which, James Clark in 5th place ahead of the other Tornado in 6th, Charles Leclerc. Daniel Ricciardo does get points for Andrew Racing, but it could have been quite a lot more but for Sebastian Vettel's suspension breakage. And Nolan Bryant makes it 2 Shake and Bakes in the top 8. As for the rest of the order, 3 retirements were down to crashes at the S's. They were Thomas Gonzalez, who is classified 17th, Kimi Raikkonen 19th and Lewis Hamilton 22nd. The rest, reliability, Vettel, Bottas and Sainz. And just counting the engines, I think it's pretty much even all the way. So got 1 Mugen out, got 2 Megatrons out, 1 Hart out, 1 Climax and 1 Judd. So Alessandro Farina holds a 2-point lead over Väinö Kymmenen. Charles Leclerc 3rd in the other Tornado, 11 points. And James Clark on 8 points, 28 for Gajera, but it will be 29 points for Tornado. And in amongst that lot is Fernando Alonso on 11 points. Tied with Leclerc, but Leclerc has a 1 second place to Alonso's 3rd. And that's confirmation of Tornado leading the Teams Championship by a single point. Shake and Bake 3rd with FJR 4th, AJ 5th and Andrew now on the scoreboard in 6th place. So that covers the flyaway stage of this season. Before the final remaining flyaways, now we enter the European season. We'll be heading over to Italy for the San Marino Grand Prix, as if to confuse you, and the magnificent Mugello circuit. So, we shall see you for then.